A man sits in the shadows of a New York apartment, writing feverishly by lamplight. Outside, someone watches from a parked car. The year is 1968, and Colonel Michal Goleniewski, once the most valuable Western intelligence asset of the Cold War, believes he is the lost heir to the Russian throne. But how does a brilliant operative who exposed over 1,600 Soviet spies end up convinced he's royalty? And why did the very agency he risked everything to help deliberately drive him toward madness? This isn't just another espionage tale. This is the story of a mind systematically destroyed by those who should have protected it. A man who gave the West its greatest intelligence victory, only to be abandoned in the labyrinth of his own fractured identity. The question isn't whether Goleniewski was a hero or a madman. The question is, what happens when the line between those two things disappears entirely? Don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You are not here by accident. April 1958. A mysterious envelope arrives at the United States Embassy in Bern, Switzerland. Inside, a letter written in German, addressed to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. The author calls himself Heckenschütze Sniper in German. He offers something unprecedented: detailed intelligence on Soviet operations in the West. But there's a catch. He refuses to work with the CIA, claiming they've been thoroughly compromised by Moscow. What the mysterious writer doesn't know is that his letter will never reach Hoover. The CIA intercepts it immediately, violating his explicit instructions. From the very first moment, their most valuable asset is built on deception. The man behind the pseudonym is Colonel Michal Goleniewski, Deputy Chief of Polish Military Counterintelligence. He has access to secrets that could reshape the Cold War. But he has no idea that the agency he's trying to avoid is the one now controlling his fate. The irony runs deeper than anyone realizes. While Goleniewski fears CIA penetration, the truth is more complex. The Soviets have indeed infiltrated Western intelligence, but not where he thinks. The real moles are hiding in plain sight, and his information will expose them all. But first, he must survive long enough to tell his story. 1922. Michal Goleniewski enters the world in a Poland caught between empires. His childhood unfolds against the backdrop of a nation struggling to define itself after centuries of foreign domination. His father works as an accountant. His mother manages their modest home. They instill in young Michal a fierce patriotism and fascination with military affairs. These early influences will shape everything that follows. When the Nazis invade in September 1939, followed weeks later by the Soviets from the east, Goleniewski witnesses his homeland torn apart. These formative experiences plant the seeds of both his hatred for totalitarian regimes and his understanding of survival under oppression. After the war, Poland becomes a Soviet satellite state. Goleniewski adapts with apparent ease, joining the Polish Workers' Party and beginning his career in intelligence. But beneath his outward compliance, something else is growing. By 1948, he's working for the UB Poland's secret police. His intelligence and resourcefulness earn rapid promotions. By 1953, he heads Department 9 of the Counterintelligence Branch, overseeing espionage operations abroad. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The KGB doesn't trust the Polish UB completely, so they assign Goleniewski to watch his own colleagues. He becomes Moscow's inside man, trusted with Soviet secrets while maintaining his Polish facade. This dual role gives him unprecedented access to intelligence from both sides, but it also forces him to confront an uncomfortable truth. He's becoming complicit in a system that destroys lives without mercy. The seeds of his eventual betrayal are planted not in ideology, but in this growing moral conflict. 1958. Goleniewski's professional success masks a personal life in complete disarray. His marriage to Anna is crumbling. She accuses him of trying to poison her, viewing him as her greatest enemy. Meanwhile, he's fallen deeply in love with Irmgard Kampf, a 28-year-old German secretary living in East Germany. But their relationship is built on lies within lies. He tells her he's a Jewish journalist named Jan Roman, a resistance fighter whose family was destroyed during the war. Using money stolen from UB operational funds, eventually totaling $60,000, he showers Irmgard with luxury goods, Swiss jewelry, a Parisian fur coat, fashionable English clothing, even a coveted Western television set. The deception runs so deep that when he reveals Jan Roman is just a pseudonym from his underground days, he gives her another false name, Roman Tarnowski. She has no idea she's in love with a Polish intelligence colonel who's already married with 3 children. This web of lies becomes unsustainable just as Goleniewski reaches his ideological breaking point. His position has given him an inside view of Soviet-dominated intelligence operations, and what he sees troubles him profoundly. The oppressive nature of the regime, coupled with his growing disillusionment, leads to a decision that will change everything. On April 1st, 1958, the same day his mysterious letter reaches Bern, he crosses a line from which there's no return. But he doesn't yet understand the game he's entering, or how thoroughly it will destroy him. The letters begin arriving monthly. Each one is a nuclear bomb detonating inside Western intelligence assumptions. Agent Sniper doesn't just name names, he provides a complete blueprint of Soviet penetration. 1,693 intelligence personalities, officers, agents, informants. The scale is breathtaking. Among his most significant early revelations, 2 spies operating inside British intelligence. One works for the Royal Navy, the other for MI6 itself. The agencies codenamed them Lambda 1 and Lambda 2, scrambling to identify the moles within their ranks. But Goleniewski's intelligence goes beyond individual spies. He's the first source to explain disinformation in detail, what we might call fake news today. He reveals how the KGB uses false information to protect their agents and mislead Western security services. The CIA reluctantly shares this intelligence with the FBI as legally required. When J. Edgar Hoover discovers the agency has been intercepting mail addressed to him personally, he becomes, in the words of one CIA analyst, mad as hell. Yet Hoover agrees to let the operation continue, provided the FBI sees everything. This decision starts a chain reaction that will eventually expose Goleniewski to the very forces hunting him. The information spreads, CIA to FBI to State Department to various embassies. Each hand it passes through increases the risk of exposure. And Goleniewski has already warned that the US Embassy in Warsaw, where much of this intelligence eventually circulates, is compromised. By late 1960, his worst fears are confirmed. Sources in Warsaw report that the KGB is hunting for a pig in the UB's foreign intelligence component who's leaking secrets to the CIA. The net is closing, and Goleniewski suspects he's the target. Irony reaches its peak when the KGB assigns Goleniewski to investigate himself. The man they trust most to find their mole is the mole. But his carefully constructed world is crumbling from multiple directions. An audit in East Germany reveals his unauthorized financial activities. His relationship with Irmgard, funded by stolen operational money, comes to light. In November 1960, Polish authorities demand an explanation for his secret relationship. Goleniewski admits to falling in love. claiming his wife Anna is mentally unstable. He asks for permission to divorce and marry Irmgard. His superiors refuse. They order him to end the relationship immediately. Not only is his heart broken, but his once promising career lies in ruins. He's demoted and removed from his senior position. With investigators circling and his personal life in shambles, Goleniewski devises a desperate plan. He tells the UB he'll return to East Germany to end his relationship with Irmgard in person. They agree, asking him to tie up loose ends with his agents while there. They've just given him the opening he needs. Goleniewski rushes to his Warsaw office, photographing remaining documents with his CIA-provided miniature camera. He removes sensitive files, some destined for a dead drop in a Warsaw park, others to be sent by courier to Berlin. He withdraws 11,300 Deutsche Marks from office funds and telegrams Irmgard that he's coming to East Berlin. What she doesn't know is that she's about to become part of an escape plan that will change both their lives forever. December 26, 1960, Goleniewski arrives in East Berlin, ostensibly on official business. He meets with colleagues from the MBP, requesting additional funding for his trip. They comply, unknowingly financing their own intelligence disaster. Irmgard still knows him only as Roman Tarnowski. She has no idea she's about to be swept into a defection that will make international headlines. On a cold January evening in 1961, the couple slips away from their surveillance. They walk toward the border between East and West Berlin, each step carrying the weight of absolute risk. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and they'll be captured. But the Berlin Wall hasn't been constructed yet. Crossing from east to west, while dangerous, remains possible for those with courage and careful planning. They make it across without incident. Goleniewski immediately contacts his CIA handler using a prearranged code name. At the U.S. consulate, he reveals himself as Heckenschütze, the mysterious sniper who's been feeding intelligence to the West for 3 years. The CIA is surprised by Irmgard's presence. They have no idea who she is or why she's there. Goleniewski, still protecting her from the shock of learning his true identity, asks her to wait outside while he speaks privately with American officials. Only then does he reveal his real name, Colonel Michal Goleniewski of the UB. The agency agrees to maintain his deception with Irmgard, at least temporarily. They transport the couple by military aircraft to Wiesbaden, west of Frankfurt, housing them in a CIA defector reception center. It's there that the final truths begin to emerge and where the systematic destruction of Goleniewski's mind begins. The CIA's Wiesbaden facility becomes the stage for a psychological drama that will unfold over years. Goleniewski finally reveals his true identity to Irmgard, while the agency admits they've been deceiving him about FBI involvement all along. Neither revelation goes well. Meanwhile, back in Warsaw, the UB realizes their worst nightmare has materialized. Breaking into Goleniewski's office safe, they discover the scope of his document collection. An urgent investigation launches to assess their losses. But the real damage is only beginning. On January 12, 1961, Goleniewski and Irmgard are flown to America under cover identities, Franz Oldenburg and Irmgard Hüttel. The CIA's debriefing process becomes a goldmine of intelligence, leading to the eventual exposure of countless Soviet spies across multiple continents. But something else is happening during these sessions, something that will have devastating consequences for Goleniewski's mental health. The agency constantly switches between using his real name and his various aliases. This seemingly minor detail begins destabilizing his already precarious psychological state. Some observers believe this is intentional, a way for the CIA to maintain psychological superiority over their asset. Whatever the motivation, the foundation is being laid for a future identity crisis that will define the rest of Goleniewski's life. The irony is devastating. The man who risked everything to help Western democracy finds himself systematically undermined by the very organizations he sought to serve. And looming over everything is James "Jesus" Angleton, the CIA's paranoid counterintelligence chief, whose suspicions about Goleniewski will soon reach fever pitch. Goleniewski's intelligence begins producing results across the globe. The mysterious Lambda 1 and Lambda 2 are finally identified, and their stories become Cold War legends. Lambda 1 is George Blake, a high-ranking MI6 officer who turned double agent after being captured during the Korean War. His betrayals to the KGB include the secret Berlin tunnel operation and numerous Western agents, many of whom paid with their lives. Lambda 2 leads to the infamous Portland spy ring. Harry Houghton, a former Royal Navy clerk, had been systematically funneling sensitive military secrets to Moscow through his girlfriend, Ethel G. Their handler, Gordon Lonsdale, was actually Conan Molody, a skilled Soviet intelligence officer. The network included Peter and Helen Kroger, real names Morris and Lona Cohen, American-born spies, providing crucial communication channels. The revelations spread across continents. In Sweden, Stig Wennerström, a senior Air Force officer and NATO official, is exposed as a long-term Soviet asset. His intelligence had compromised Western security throughout the strategically important Nordic region. In the Middle East, Israel Beer, a prominent security expert and confidant of Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, falls to Goleniewski's intelligence. Beer had been providing Moscow with valuable insights into Israeli defense policies and military capabilities. West Germany's BND intelligence service discovers that Heinz Felfe, their deputy head, had been a Soviet agent since the early 1950s. The compromise runs to the very top of their organization. In the United States, the exposure of Ervin Skarbek, a State Department official working at the Warsaw Embassy, reveals the extent of Soviet honey trap operations. Skarbek had been blackmailed after being caught with a Polish woman sent to seduce him. But Skarbek's low-level access raises questions. Was he sacrificed to protect a more valuable Soviet asset within the embassy? The speculation points to whoever leaked Goleniewski's activities back to Moscow, the person whose betrayal started this entire chain of events. Each exposure validates Goleniewski's intelligence, but also increases the danger to his own life. By 1963, James Angleton's suspicions about Goleniewski had reached dangerous levels. The CIA's counterintelligence chief, already notorious for his paranoid mole hunts, had found a new favorite defector, Anatoly Golitsyn. Golitsyn, a KGB officer who defected from the Soviet embassy in Helsinki around the same time as Goleniewski, made extraordinary claims. He said he'd been personally briefed by Stalin in 1952 and had access to the highest grade intelligence. But Golitsyn's information proved either fabricated or recycled from other sources, including Goleniewski's own reports. What he did offer was the so-called monster plot, a supposed Soviet plan to paralyze Western intelligence by sending false defectors to spread disinformation. According to Golitsyn, Goleniewski was exactly such a plant, a Soviet provocation designed to mislead the West. Golitsyn claimed he himself was conveniently the only genuine defector acting in Western interests. For reasons that remain unclear, Angleton believed every word. The man whose paranoia had paralyzed the CIA for years made an exception for Golitsyn, accepting his claims without the usual skeptical analysis. This decision would prove catastrophic for Goleniewski. By mid to late 1963, The CIA's attitude toward their most valuable asset had shifted dramatically. His application for U.S. citizenship stalled. He was kept in increasingly isolated conditions. Investigations into his intelligence leads slowed to a crawl. His requests to meet with CIA Director John McCone were denied. The agency reneged on agreements to pay and protect him. Everything Goleniewski had feared about Western intelligence, their capacity for betrayal, their willingness to sacrifice assets, was coming true in the most personal way possible. As his relationship with the CIA deteriorated, Goleniewski began making increasingly bizarre claims about his ancestry. He started hinting that he was descended from Russian royalty, specifically, that he was a member of the Romanov family. The Imperial Russian dynasty had been overthrown in the 1917 revolution. Tsar Nicholas II and 17 family members were executed in a single day, with many other relatives following them to their graves. Ever since, dozens of pretenders had emerged claiming to be heirs to the throne and the considerable Romanov fortune hidden in Western banks. Feeling betrayed and abandoned by his CIA handlers, Goleniewski went all in on this claim. He declared himself to be Alexei Romanov, the surviving son of the last Tsar and rightful heir to the Russian throne. He used this name when applying for U.S. citizenship and when marrying Irmgard in the United States. His claim carried enough weight that the most senior bishop in the U.S. Russian Orthodox Church facilitated their marriage. By the end of 1963, with the U.S. government having effectively abandoned him, Goleniewski made a desperate public move. On August 10, 1964, he appeared on New York radio, publicly proclaiming himself Alexei, son of the last Tsar of Russia. His story: he'd avoided assassination during the revolution by being smuggled through Siberia to Poland, eventually making his way to the West to reclaim his birthright. The American media, always hungry for sensational stories, embraced the tale. On September 12, 1964, Guy Richards announced Goleniewski's claim in the New York Journal American. When he and Irmgard had a daughter, they named her Tatiana Romanov. By this point, Goleniewski seemed to have convinced himself completely that he was indeed the lost heir to the Russian throne. While Goleniewski descended into his royal fantasy, real threats circled closer. In April 1961, a military court in Warsaw had tried him in absentia and sentenced him to end. The UB launched Operation Telechnik, tasking multiple agents with tracking him down and executing the sentence. The Soviets and their satellites had a history of sending operatives to carry out court-sanctioned punishments, and Goleniewski was acutely aware of this danger. Living under constant threat of assassination couldn't have helped his deteriorating mental state. By 1968, the UB had managed to conduct elaborate surveillance operations on Goleniewski's Queens apartment building, the Silver Towers. They mapped out his apartment and surroundings, sending detailed intelligence back to Warsaw. While Goleniewski might not have known these specific details, he certainly assumed he was being watched. The knowledge that UB or KGB operatives might end his life at any moment added another layer to his psychological pressure. After the media sensation around his royal claims faded in the mid-1960s, Goleniewski retreated into near-total obscurity. But he didn't disappear quietly. From 1974 onward, he published a monthly bulletin called Double Eagle, an outlet for his increasingly outlandish claims and conspiracy theories. He hired lawyers, wrote letters to government officials, and made efforts to compel Congress to investigate his mistreatment by the CIA. The brilliant intelligence officer who had once held the fate of the Cold War in his hands had become a marginalized figure, fighting legal battles and promoting theories that few took seriously. It was a tragic end to one of the most significant intelligence operations in history. But were there secrets that Goleniewski took to his grave? Former CIA officers, speaking decades later under condition of anonymity, hinted at aspects of his case that never made it into official files. One retired operative suggested that Goleniewski's royal claims might have contained fragments of truth, not about being Alexei Romanov, but about Polish aristocratic connections that the UB had deliberately obscured from his background. Documents released through Freedom of Information Act requests in the 1990s revealed curious gaps. Entire sections of Goleniewski's debriefing files remain classified, even 60 years later. What could be so sensitive that it still requires protection? Some intelligence historians theorize that Goleniewski provided information about a penetration so significant that acknowledging it would damage US-British relations to this day. Others suggest he revealed details about joint CIA-MI6 operations that went far beyond anything publicly admitted. There's another puzzling detail that rarely gets mentioned. After his defection, several Soviet intelligence officers who had worked closely with Goleniewski were quietly reassigned or disappeared entirely. One former KGB colonel, interviewed in Moscow during the 1980s, claimed that Goleniewski had been feeding information to the West for far longer than 3 years, possibly since the early 1950s. If true, this would mean his intelligence career was essentially one long deception operation, with him playing triple agent from almost the beginning. The financial mystery deepens the intrigue. When Goleniewski defected, he carried with him not just documents, but also detailed knowledge of Swiss bank accounts used by Polish intelligence for Western operations. Some of this money simply vanished after his defection. CIA financial records from the period show unexplained payments to unnamed assets. Could some of these funds have been diverted to support Goleniewski's increasingly expensive lifestyle? His daughter Tatiana's silence becomes even more intriguing when viewed through this lens. Family friends suggest she possesses documents that would shed new light on her father's claims, but chooses to keep them private. What might those papers reveal about the man who claimed to be the last Romanov heir? July 1993. Michal Goleniewski passes away in Lenox Hill Hospital, New York, after a brief illness. His end receives minimal attention, just a small paid obituary notice in the New York Times. But even in those final days, mystery surrounded him. Hospital staff later reported that several visitors came to see him, speaking in languages they couldn't identify. Security cameras from that period have since been destroyed, and visitor logs show names that couldn't be verified. One nurse, speaking anonymously decades later, described an elderly man who visited Goleniewski repeatedly during his final week. This visitor carried what appeared to be vintage photographs and spoke to Goleniewski in whispered Polish. After each visit, Goleniewski would become agitated, muttering about the real treasure and what they never found. Even more intriguing, medical staff noticed that Goleniewski received mail addressed to at least 5 different names during his hospital stay. Some letters bore postmarks from countries that didn't exist when he first defected. Others arrived with no postmarks at all. His apartment in the Silver Towers was cleared by men who identified themselves as government officials, though no agency has ever acknowledged this action. Neighbors reported seeing boxes of documents removed, along with what appeared to be photographic equipment and radio gear. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. Building security footage from 1993 shows these officials making multiple trips over several days, not the single sweep that would be standard for a government cleanup. They seemed to know exactly what they were looking for, heading directly to specific locations within the apartment. A former Silver Towers maintenance worker, interviewed in 2010, claimed he was asked to help move a heavy safe from Goleniewski's bedroom closet. Inside, he glimpsed what looked like historical documents, jewelry, and several small packages wrapped in oilcloth. When he asked about the contents, one of the officials told him it was evidence in an ongoing investigation. No such investigation has ever been publicly acknowledged.